Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. Is it on? This thing on? I just want to start the meeting formally. This is a sunshine meeting tonight, public meeting, and what that means is that it's been advertised properly so that if more than 4 members of the council came, they could all come. So let me just read the Open Public Meetings Act recital this evening. So adequate notice of this meeting as required by the Open Public Meetings Act was provided through posting, mailing, and filing of this notice on January 25th, 2019. Notice was on that date posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building, mailed to Westfield Leader and the Star Ledger, and filed with the clerk of the town of Westfield. So that just gives us the right all to be here, and the council members that are here, obviously if there's more than 4, we can have that happen. So I want to just thank everybody for coming. My name is Jim Gilday. I'm the town administrator. We have a short presentation tonight by Councilman Habgood, who is the finance chairperson. Scott Olson, our CFO, is also here. Happy to see we have many department heads here that came tonight to listen to the public and see what kind of input they may have. Looking forward to going through, telling you how we did in 2018 and getting some input for 2019. We're going to share some information with you also about what we already know about 2019. Some things that are, challenges already going into 2019. So let me turn it over to Councilman Habgood to start off from there, and we'll go from there. And we'll be a lot of myself, Scott, or Linda back and forth answering questions. One last thing, anyone who wants to ask a question later, you'll be able to ask it. We'll repeat it through the microphone so the camera is being filmed for TV 36, and we'll also, once this is done, we'll capture it, put it on all our social media channels and our website as well. We want the audience to hear the questions, or the public to hear the questions, and of course the answers. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, everybody. I'm Linda Habgood, and as Jim said, I'm the chair of the Finance Committee, and we're kicking off the budget season. Actually, really officially, we did it a week ago with the auditor of the town and our bond counsel, taking a look at how we did in 2018. And then tonight we will get input from the public, and then Saturday morning we'll start with a long session that kicks us off through a bunch of meetings with the different department heads. I'd really like to thank all of the department heads for coming tonight and being interested in what the public has to say about their priorities and their cares and concerns about 2019. We're trying to take the meetings with the departments this year and think about the mayor's priorities, which we'll see later in the presentation. So hopefully this will get everyone in the right mindset for how we can be investing our monies this year. So as Jim said, tonight we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about some high-level stuff just to provide context, and then we'd really like to hear from all of you and learn what things should be front of our minds as we go forward. So tonight I have 2 members of the Finance Committee here tonight, Councilman Contract and Councilman Stokes. Thank you both for coming. I know the Councilwoman Nealon had another family obligation, couldn't be here tonight. And we have our newly elected freeholder, Kim Muded. Thank you, Kim, for coming. One of the things that Kim and I have been talking about is doing a meeting similar to this in a few weeks' time, probably in the middle of budget season, where we're going to invite some of the officials from Union County to come and give a presentation on how our Westfield tax dollars are being utilized by the county. Things that they have do for us every year, and some things that we're going to be working on together in the future. So we'll do another announcement through the public information officer, who is also here tonight. Thank you, Kim. And just encourage everyone to come out for that meeting too. So because I feel like a lot of people have questions about how the county utilizes our tax dollars, and there's plenty of people who can answer a lot of questions for us at the county level. So I think we've talked a little bit about what we're going to cover tonight, and so we can move on to the next slide. We just thought it would be a good idea to give you an idea of, on a high-level basis, how many tax dollars the town receives and where it goes. so that we can kind of whittle down to what decisions we're really making in these budget meetings with all the departments, because there's a lot of money that the town manages, but a lot of it gets flowed through to other parties. So as you see, these are tax collections for 2018, over $173 million. The large majority of that we collect for the school district and then, provide it back to them against their budget that is over $100 million. Then you can see how it breaks down with the Union County portion and the Union County open space tax levy. The library is the tiny pie piece at the top of the pie chart, and then the yellow pie for last year, $27,975,000 and $396. That's the municipal budget. So as we take that yellow pie piece and go to the next slide, I didn't put any words on this for a reason, because you wouldn't be able to read them. I can barely read them even when I'm looking at it close on the page, because it breaks down into a lot of different segments. But the reason that I wanted to show this, and I might have Jim come up and give a little bit more detail, but if you look at the top of the screen for the big green pie piece, it's sort of northwest at the top, and go all the way around to the tiny blue sliver that's kind of at 2 o'clock, plus the two big pie pieces at the bottom, the teal one and the red one. Those are all non-discretionary pieces of our municipal budget. So it's amounts that basically come in, we're told every year that we have to pay, and we don't have any ability to change it. And then even inside some of those other parts, the big pink pie piece in the southeast quadrant of the pie is our police and fire department budget. So obviously there we have discretion around some of the things, but a lot of that is salary and wages. So this is really just to give you an idea of how much and how little we really do decide in the budget process. Jim, do you want to add any detail to that?
Just a slight bit more detail on that, a little taller. Again, it's important to note, again, a lot of people who, new people to the council, like Linda for last year, people are surprised to learn how little of the budget, all the budgets, not just Westfield or municipal, but even school budgets and county budgets, are really discretionary. And so as Linda mentioned, just to give a little more detail, this area here represents things like audit and legal costs, things like utility costs, Railway Valley Sewage Authority. That's all of our toilet flushes have to go somewhere. We have to pay for that. Everyone pays for it. We have a very big bill for that. That's something we get a bill for, and we have to pay it. We have street lighting, which is this yellow piece here. Again, while PSC&G is responsible for the street lights, they bill the towns for the streetlights. That number by itself is almost $350,000 just for street lighting. We have the reserve for uncollected taxes. This is a unique piece of our pie. This is a piece of the pie that only the town's budget has included in it. The school, county, and library don't. And the reason we have it in is because we are the tax collector. We have to actually assure that if we don't collect all the taxes, the county, school, and library get their taxes, and we're obligated by law to provide that. So that number by itself, that green piece of pie, represents about $2.5 million that we are required by law to have in our budget, because we're the tax collector. We must guarantee everyone gets their taxes, and we're the last on the list of that. And then these two on the bottom, this piece and this piece here, represent our insurance costs, which is we're part of a joint insurance fund, which actually does save us quite a bit of money. Actually, I can tell you a little preview of 2019 number for a moment. Our insurance costs under what's called the joint insurance fund, we're actually going to see a slight reduction this year. And that's because we share insurance costs with 8 other communities. Things like personal liability, or workers' comp, auto liability, and the list goes on and on, employment practice liability. and the sharing with other towns really makes a difference. We share those costs, and we're seeing a benefit in 2019. Also health insurance and all the different things for employees. And this red piece of pie here represents pensions. And so that's a big number. And again, like we said before, there are certain bills we get. Pension bill is one of them. So we have two pensions we pay. We have what's called the police and fire retirement system, which is the larger of the two, and that's a pension, so we have to pay that bill. And then what's called the public employees retirement system. That's everybody else who are not police and fire. So while the employees contribute their share as per the law every single paycheck and every single year, the town contributes their portion every year. And so that's a big bill. The other parts of the pie, this big pink one we mentioned, police and fire, as Councilman Habgood mentioned, a lot of that is non-discretionary, salaries and wages that are contractual. Some of the things, even in the operating budget, are not something we can actually have discretion over. Contracts, software, the 911 system information. So a lot of information there and a lot of things. There are some things that are discretionary, things that we can do. We put some capital items in there sometimes, and that does change from year to year. We do more things other years, less than other years, so there's some discretion there, but not a lot. This red piece of the pie here is Public Works. Again, contractual employee information, and this is where we actually do a lot of things that impact people. Potholes, leaf collection, snow plowing, the list goes on and on. So while some of that's discretionary, I don't know that we want to take some of that away either from a public perspective. So this gives you a sense of some of the things that are in there. And in 2019, we'll be producing a chart like this, and it might change a little bit based on priorities and actions we do in 2019. We'll have a little different breakdown as we go forward. But there's a little context for where money goes from the expenditure side only. So, keep going.
So, just to give you a couple of highlights from the 2018 budget. We learned from the from our accountant last week that realized municipal revenue was up over 6%, or $2.96 million over our anticipated revenues. And that means, as it all filtered through, that even though we utilized $4.2 million of our surplus, we actually earned almost that exact amount back. So we're back up to a surplus as of the end of 2018 of $14.51 million. So it's a very healthy position for the town to be in. And the other exciting thing is that it gives us, again, some monies that we can use to contribute toward the achievement of priorities that the mayor and the council have been talking with everyone about. So, the other thing that I want to call out specifically, the last bullet point, is about interest, because we really did well with our interest earning this year. And I have to thank our CFO, Scott Olson, who's here with us tonight, for doing such a great job managing our cash budgets, because and it's really shown in the end. We were up over $100,000 more than what we anticipated, or what we would have foreseen earning based on what we did in 2017. So I'll quickly go through this next slide. This is really just about process. I thought people might be interested in understanding a little bit more about how all this comes together. The foundation for the whole budget comes out of a lot of long-term planning. So the first green column up on the slide, talks about 6-year capital plans that we develop with the Public Works Department, and long-term goals and plans that we also talk about with the Police Department and the Fire Department. And then as we go through the budget meetings with the departments, we talk about whether we're going to be able to spend money this year on what we had actually allocated. Last year, we were fortunate enough in having extra surplus that we invested in 2 years worth of our DPW equipment. Some of that, by the way, has really just been purchased, because this purchase cycle takes a while. So you haven't quite yet seen the benefits of having 2 new street sweepers out there, because Greg, when did they arrive? The streets, yeah, so we're going to slowly but surely, see the positive impacts of, all of those investments that we're making. So we talked about the orange column and what the budget process is, kicking off really on Saturday morning with our first meetings with the departments, and then we'll work through to a meeting that we have to present the budget to the council on March 12th. Then there will be 2 weeks for comment and consideration, and we'll introduce to the public on March 26th. So that's kind of what the timing is around the budget, because we have obligations to the state to file our budget by a certain deadline. The next slide is important for us to look at because these are the mayor's priorities for her long-term goals, as well as so we're looking at things that we spent money on last year and things that we want to be doing this year. And what I really want to call out here is, for you to be thinking about in your comments how these things might align. So I saw that we had someone from the Media Council here tonight, so I'm hoping that Liv's going to come up and share with us some of the things that the Media Council is looking at that can help us to communicate better and to be more efficient around town. And so as you look at it, we're looking at strengthening communication capabilities, a high priority on infrastructure and safety, economic development and community engagement, and then enhancing services to everyone in the public. And across all of that is obviously staying very fiscally responsible. One thing that the mayor mentioned in a town council meeting a couple of weeks ago is that this is the year of the pedestrian. So we're going to be focusing a lot on sidewalks and safety and other things around making Westfield a more walkable town, and focus on our downtown and how the pedestrian traffic plays into that. So I'm just going to briefly mention a couple of our goals for 2019. They specifically relate to the budget, and then I really am going to open this up for people to come up to the mic and ask questions or raise points that they'd like for us to consider in the budget process. So the goal here is to allocate some of those surplus monies toward our goals and make further investments against those priorities for town, but not to to maintain a safe nest egg or retained earnings amount inside of our on our balance sheet. So we're going to aim to keep a $9 to $10 million surplus, which will give us approximately $4 to $5 million to invest against our priorities this year. And some of the things that we're going to be doing are investing in roads and sewers and equipment and sidewalks and safety. As in the last year that I've been a councilwoman, I obviously been doing things like the budget, but I've been talking to a lot of constituents too. And you start to see trends in things that people are interested in improving in town. And I will say that I hear about roads all the time. I think we all do. Improving the sewer system to avoid those backups that are causing, big ice patches to form because the water's not traveling efficiently through the gutters, from sump pumps and getting into the sewer system. We're talking a lot about a program for sidewalks that we used to have in town, a number of years ago, where the town would split the cost with a resident to replace sidewalks. So we're going to consider this year bringing that program back, and I'm interested in getting some feedback from the public on that tonight. And I want to also mention as a goal, and this has been something that I've talked about for over a year now, that since we have very little control over our costs, as Jim was mentioning, one of the things that we need to do so that we don't have to keep covering increased costs on the back of the taxpayer is to look for new revenue streams. So all of you are out there all the time. You all work inside of these departments, or you live in the town, and I'm very interested in hearing from everyone about ideas to bring in, new revenue streams. So that's the end of the presentation, and I encourage you to come up to the mic. If there are things that you think about after this meeting and you'd like to let us know about them, please feel free to use this email address, or on the website you can also find Councilman Stokes' email address and phone number. Call him, not me. If you have other things you want to share. I'm just kidding. All of our email addresses and phone numbers are up there. Feel free to reach out and share after the meeting as well. Jim, anything else that you want to add before we open up to the public?
No, I was just saying, we were trying to kind of the microphones are a little.
Yeah, and you have a better voice for repeating things than I do.
But if you have questions, you ask them. I'll repeat them. Everyone can hear them, and then we can, myself, Scott, Linda, anyone, we can try to provide answers. So the floor is open to questions. Don't all come running at once. Anyone have any questions? Any thoughts? Answers? Anything? Yes, sir.
What kind of ideas do you have now to increase revenue?
Ideas to increase revenue. Lots of ideas. So first of all, I think it's important to say that, as Councilman Habgood said, we have a lot of expenses that, of course, we don't control. And revenues are obviously very important. So there are many things that the town can do. Right now, there's some review of various fees, various fines that can be looked at. We've noticed in doing some comparisons of the communities, a lot of our fees or fines for certain things are low, comparatively speaking, so we're looking at those things. But then, there's lots of other things that come up in a budget. There's leases that we have with various organizations we're looking at to see what can be done and renegotiated there. And then there's other things, we have all sorts of other fees we can look at or sources, but the main source of money we have, our tax collector sitting here, he earns the most revenue of any department, and that's tax collections. And right now we're going through a revaluation. So we're also, the council is very mindful of that and looking at, making sure that process is successful and runs through it properly. So mindful of not having to increase fees in other places at a time where people may have increased taxes as well. So, but things like looking at other towns, what they're doing, comparing our fees and fines to those people and those towns, and looking to see what we can do there. Those are small things, but there's some of the things. I don't know if you have any other thoughts yourself, but those are things we can do. So. Oh, yeah, one last thing. So, yeah, last thing. And so cash management plans. We mentioned before the CFO, we had a very good year. Of course, interest rates increased, which was very positive. We did some changes. We actually, thanks to our CFO a couple of years ago, we did a bank RFP, request for proposals, to get new banking services, which reduced some of our fees, increased interest rates. Scott is able to also move money around to maximize our revenue on those things. So this year, 18, we did see a very large increase in our interest, and we're hoping we can continue to do that. And with the healthy balance we have in our surplus and other cash on hand, that allows us to do more investing, which is important. So that's another piece of the puzzle. We did experience some increase in that in 2018 to 19.
We also added the investment advisory.
Yep, and the last thing is there are some members here tonight of the new Investment Advisory Council, volunteers who have assisted or agreed to assist in advising the council on various things, bigger picture things. So we're looking at maybe this is a year we need to go to the bond market and get their outside expertise from them to kind of advise us. We also have, of course, a bond council. We have our auditors to review as well. So those are some of the things we can do as well. But yeah, revenue is one of the most important things we need to get to help to balance our budget. So,
Jim, I have two other things.
Sure.
I think grants, you might want to talk about the Minda-Wascom Playground.
Sure.
That's using grants as a source of revenue. Yep. And also public-private partnerships. I think Adams Fest is as well as like something like Adams Fest, yep, which has the opportunity to bring in extra revenue to more than eclipse the costs. Yeah,
so the councilman, if you haven't heard, councilman mentioning, other things we can do or have done. Grants, of course, we always apply for grants. We do apply for quite a bit of grants every year. We do get them. County and Union, for example, Kim, you'll be hearing about more grants from us. But we always get and apply for a Kids Recreation Trust Fund grant, which is a matching grant for the county for things like recreation things. So one of our biggest ones this past year was Minda-Wascom Playground. So we're we're able to get two matching grants from the county, level the playing field in kids recreation. We partnered that with some money from the Optimist Club, local club, and we also partnered with a very large grant from the Westfield Foundation. All grants together equal over $550,000 to go towards the amazing playground we have out there. So that was a very big grant thing. But we get little grants all the time to offset various things that go on in town. Police department, for example, Chief Cataloro's here. We get grants for body armor, grants for DWI checks, grants for cell phone ticketing, click it or ticket, seatbelt things. So the little things we get every year to offset some of our costs as we go out in the field and do enforcement. And then what was the other thing you mentioned?
Like Adams.
Oh yeah, so other partnerships. So a couple of things to mention. I mentioned it earlier. I mentioned the Joint Insurance Fund. That's a very large shared service we're a part of. We were actually started that with a lot of the towns that are there now in 1994, and that really helps to reduce our insurance costs. But we actually have, and our health officer, where is she, Megan, over there? Our health officer, Megan Avalone, actually heads up one of the largest, if not the largest, regional health department in the entire state. So, and also she happens to be the president of a state organization this year. So, we are a model agency for the state of New Jersey when it comes to shared services with departmental sharing services. So, for example, in Megan's case, we contract with multiple towns, some very close to us, others not that close, but we provide services to them and they pay us and offset our costs, and we're able to use that to, obviously, to Westfield's advantage to get more services for Westfield, but we also are able to serve those towns, and we have an excellent reputation due to Megan and her staff's reputation and ability to serve residents. So those are things we're always looking at. And right now, there are things we're talking about with the state. So Public Works Director Greg O'Neill's here. We actually are talking to Fanwood and Scotch Plains about a potential shared service with Public Works. The state's been kind enough to research for us on our behalf some shared service opportunities, so we'll see what pans out there. And there's lots of other things we've talked about in the past. There's things like shared courts, there's shared dispatch. So the size of Westfield, we actually are in a great position. We're one of the larger towns in our immediate area. We are in a great position to be a lead agency in those things. So it's getting to have people work with us, and we've had great success with that in the past. So those are all other things we can do too. Yes, Frank.
So you mentioned the state, and at the council meeting on Tuesday, I mentioned about the tax relief credits that Mayor Smith talked about with Scotch Plains, and those credits are going to the state now. And if they came back to Scotch Plains, they're saying there'd be $700,000 potential, probably more of Westfield. Is that something, do you think that has any legs, that those credits could come back to the towns instead of going to the state?
Sure. So
that could be a big number, to our town.
Yep.
700,000 to Scotch Plains. I got to believe it's north of that for Westfield.
So just everyone understands the question. There's some discussion Councilman Arena was asking about. It's really like state aid. So state aid, otherwise known as state aid, it's made up of various components. Over the years, those components have shrunk down. There's really two components that every town gets now. Well, we get energy tax receipt and what's called the Consolidated Municipal Tax Relief Act, otherwise known as COMTRA. Anyway, we get those two numbers, and state aid for us is about $2.5 million. That same state aid only 10 years ago was over $4 million. And over the years, that's shrunk. And so what they're talking about in Scotch Plains and the state as a whole, as a town manager, I'm also in touch with all the other managers around the state, part of the state organization. There's a lot of discussion about having the state restore some of the state aid that basically was the towns, and over the years has been transferred under different titles for the state to keep rather than transfer back to the towns. I don't know how far they'll actually get, but there is talk about it, and it's something that for Westfield would be north of $700,000 each year.
And I bring that up because we're talking about additional revenue sources. To get $700,000 million additional revenue, that can be tough, but this is every year in and year out, it's a constant. That can be a big. Think about what we could do. We talked about roads and sewer. What we could do with $700,000 if we had that back to our town.
Sure, and again, usually when that happens, if it was to happen, it'd be phased in over some years. Just it's an important point for the public to understand. Our state aid, like most other communities around us, has been stagnant, been flat for the past 6 years. So good news is we're not losing any money. Bad news is we're not gaining any money. But that's been a consistent revenue source for us, about $2.4 or $5 million. We're not sure what's going to happen in 2015, or 19 today. And so we'll see. And we don't find out about that number until the state decides what its budget is going to be. So that number will come to us usually the first week of March. So that's why the state then we can't finalize our budget until we get our state aid number, which comes through the county to the town, and then we get our number, and then that plugs in our budget as one of our last revenue sources. So we usually assume flat state aid, that's been our model, but it can change, up or down, and we usually find out about that at the very end of the process, so. Sure. Anybody else? Yes, Brad?
You talked about shared services, the mayor's talked about shared service with Scotch Plains and other towns. What about within the town, the Board of Ed? I mean, they maintain an awful lot of properties in town, our DPW maintains. Why are we not saving money by sharing those resources?
Okay, so everyone hear the question. This is about shared services, not just with other communities, but within the town, between this town and the Board of Education. So actually, we do share a lot of services with the Board of Education. They're not necessarily formalized in agreements, but we do things, for example, the Recreation Director, Don Bogardus, is here, and this is something we started many years ago. It's a small thing, but it is a more efficient thing. So the Recreation Department schedules all fields in town, not just town, but Board of Education fields, small shared service. We have equipment sharing with Public Works and Board of Education. They have things, we have things, we do things informally. But we have talked to them, and they're very receptive. We have some conversations going on about bigger things, facilities, and sharing public works. So your issue about maintenance of fields, we've actually talked to them about that. And so, again, we always talk about the Board of Education is really in the facility business. We're really in the outdoor business. Okay, we excel at outdoor maintenance. That's what we do. Public Works does mostly outdoor maintenance. We have facilities as well, but the Board of Education specializes in indoor maintenance, buildings. And so we've talked about that, and those discussions are ongoing. So there are things we can do internally, and they're very open to that, and so are we. So we're going to continue to discuss those things, and that can save some money. Again, the concept of even the sharing of service is still the same pot of money. Same taxes collected, but there might be some efficiency that can reduce that. But I always say the field thing. I was in recreation for many, many years myself, and the residents don't really know or don't really care whose field it is. They want to know that it's maintained, it's playable. So in the day, we can make that a reality for everybody, no matter which field it is. That's really the goal. So, anything else? Questions? Thoughts? Yes, sir. Hey, Adam.
The library budget. How do you get to decide how much tax revenue they get, and what do they spend it on?
Okay, very good question. So the question is about library budget and what do they spend it on and how is it determined? Scott, I may defer to you on just the technicality here, but basically the library budget is determined by using a calculation based on the ratables and the total valuation of properties in the town. And there's a formula for that. Important to note that the state will not approve any community's budget unless you approve the minimum required by law for the library. So you can send your budget down and say, we're not giving the library $100,000 this year. We're not going to approve. It's a required law that you must give the library what it's required to do. Now, separate from that, once that number is established, and we have that number for this year, there's about a $60,000 increase this year in the library appropriation. It's about $2.5 million in change, maybe a little more than that. And that number is, continue when, it's interesting information that back in the 2008, 9, 10, 11 years when there was a financial crisis, the library budget started going down. So it was a telltale sign when things are bad, library budgets go down. When you're doing well, library budgets go up. It's a function of your property values and the ratio. So separate, complete board that's appointed. We have a library board of trustees, which is an autonomous board that actually is appointed by the mayor and council, and they have authority to spend that money. And so those are separate meetings, public meetings. So they will go through and just like our budget, there's lots of non-discretionary things in that budget, but then there's also discretionary things. So they approve the salary and wages, they have their own unions, they have their own legal counsel, and they have their own operations and so forth. So the library board of trustees does that, and the only thing the town council is really involved besides appointing the board is approving their portion of the appropriation in our budget. Everything else is really handled by them. But I don't want to just say that they're separate. We have a great relationship. We work very well together, and they are also very aligned with what the town and town council wants to do. It's always been that way. But that number, $2.5 million, is not a small budget for one department. So.
One other question on the energy tax receipts. Do we know? I guess the state's been siphoning revenue from those funds for years, and I guess I'm just curious to know off the top of your head how much we, I guess we were talking about that before, but how much the state is actually, taking in terms of Westfield
actually, my recollection is, and Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, the energy tax receipt is the only item that's actually increasing a bit. And so, if I have that right, that's the one that increases. So, of the two components of state aid we currently get, what's been happening over the years, our number has been flat as a total. But what's happening, the energy tax receipt is increasing slightly, but this exact reciprocal number is being taken out of the Consolidated Municipal Property Tax Act. And so what happens is, energy tax receipt number is a required payment that the state must make to municipalities based on a formula. So they're meeting that number every year and have been for the past 6 years. In order to meet it, they take from the other component. So our Consolidated Municipal Tax Relief Act has been reducing every year. That number used to be, I don't know what the number is, it's now only $140,000 roughly. That was hundreds of thousands of dollars. The energy tax rate continues to increase. So in the end of the day, what will end up happening, unless something changes, we'll be left with one component of state aid, energy tax receipt. And they'll be able to, the trend has been they will pay the towns a minimum required. But there, as I said before, there is talk going on in the state to change that. We have a new governor, so obviously we'll see what happens there. But again, as we all know, the state has its own financial issues, and so we hope that we get an increase in state aid, but 6 years in a row it's been flat. But they do switch those numbers a little bit every year. But the only one that's going to have is energy tax receipts, only one. So.
And it's been flat for how many years? Over 10 years.
I mean, I was going to say 6 or 7, but maybe it's 8 or 9 years. But the total state aid package has been flat. So, yes.
So I'm not sure if you can explain this or reiterate it to the public, but can you explain what percentage of taxes we collect? If there are delinquent taxes, does that lower our obligation to the school tax and to the county tax? Obviously, I know the answer, but I just want you to explain that to the public.
Come on up, Doug.
Our obligation to collect the taxes, even if people are delinquent in what we have to pay.
No, okay. So just again, a reminder for the public. So the question from Councilman Stokes is about what are the taxes we collect, where do we put them, and what is our obligation if we don't have taxes paid? So a couple of things that are interesting to note here. Part of our revenue that we anticipate every year, part of that is called delinquent tax. We know after the year closes out what our tax collections are. We know if we've had excess collections, and we also have an estimate of what our delinquency number will be. So it's an anticipated revenue in our budget for every year, in this case 2019. For example, that number last year was we anticipated $1,050,000 to be collected in delinquencies. We actually collected $1,089,000. So we're a little bit above where we so very close, and we kind of knew that. We knew what the collections taxes collected were. We knew what to expect. On the other hand, the tax collections are estimated at a certain amount, a certain percentage every year, and we had excess collections and taxes. That happens quite often too. People prepay. We had people pay early because they're leaving. They're going on vacation for a few months sometimes. We had the prepayments of 17 when the whole tax thing were changing. That hit, I think that hit in 18, or also was accounted in 17, right?
Yes.
It had to be paid by the end of
Paid of 17, yes. And so anyway, excess collections can vary wildly, and so we're very mindful this year particularly, because of the revaluation happening and new tax assessments going out later this year with new tax bills, there may or may not be an impact on collections this year, but we're mindful of that. One other thing we put in our budget every year is we have a reserve item for tax appeals. And that's important because if you don't have that, then your generating of surplus is hit by any appeals that come in. So we have a reserve for tax appeals to protect that from happening. That's something we're considering this year also, considering that number, maybe increasing it because we're in a very interesting year with revaluation happening. So that'll be something that we have to consider. But the last piece of your question, Doug, so again, just a reminder, as one of the first slides we saw, we got the tax collection agency. So Henry, our tax collector, was here. His office collected $173 million last year, and we kept $27 million of it. The rest of it we actually give out to the county, the school, the library, and it's done over quarterly payments. Debt service is part of that for those organizations as well. But we keep one of the smallest amounts for our operations, and of course then that is spread out again. But it is important to note that the majority of what we do get is obviously we're a pass-through. And again, the one component we have that no one else has is the reserve for uncollected taxes, because we are the collector. So that's something we have in our budget, which is an impact. And again, important note for those that are really paying attention is that the 2% cap on taxes still is in place. There's been discussions at the state about the 2% cap for interest arbitration has sunsetted, meaning that it doesn't apply anymore, and the governor's office has been talking about whether that's going to be reinstated or let it truly lapse. What that means is in contract negotiations, you're no longer bound by the 2% cap. You can go beyond that. And we've already seen, we're in negotiations with a lot of our unions right now. Some communities are going well beyond that. And that's their choice, of course, but it does impact the bottom line. The one thing that doesn't change is a 2% tax cap for the tax, our budget, our tax increase. So the reserve for uncollected taxes, for example, that's included in our 2% tax levy. Okay, years ago it was an exemption, not an exemption anymore. The only exemptions you really have from the 2% cap is if you have debt service that is increasing beyond 2%, health insurance debt increasing beyond 2%, and one other. Something else, but those are the two main components. And so, in our case, I'm happy to say for 2019, those two components, which normally are large numbers, we're actually managing those very well in 19. We'll have a reduction in both of those, so there'll be no exceptions beyond the 2% cap on those categories. But everything else is included within that 2% cap. So, if you do have a union contract that you might settle for more than 2%, that impacts your other opportunities of doing other things. So, and of course, but we're in a very good financial position. Surplus number we have, very healthy position. So that's a good place to be. So anyway, hopefully I answered the question.
Jim, can you just add on, you mentioned about the reserve for tax appeals,
Yep.
the record of our revaluation company in setting the new assessments, and for those folks who, appeal them, the record and actually winning those appeals.
Sure.
Because I think that reassures residents that we hired a really good quality company, and they're setting the right assessments.
Yeah.
They're doing it fairly, and that's why the appeals, if they do occur, are actually not being granted.
Yep.
Because they did a good job in the first place.
So again, the question for the public on TV 36 here and other sources is about revaluation and the fact that the company we've hired actually has a very good track record of defending the appeals, and we do reserve tax appeal money. To be prudent financially, you might increase that number this year to make sure we're protected. But to your point, Councilman Contract, the thing is, the company we've hired, part of the deal is that they are to do the statutory process for revaluation, set a new assessment, set a new tax rate. The tax assessor is here. She's a very vital part of that. So she will actually be certifying the new assessments probably sometime in mid to late February. Once that's certified, then the tax appeal window opens and people can appeal. So part of the contract we have with this revaluation company is that they are obligated to defend those appeals for 2 years. They're the ones setting them. They have to defend them, and they'll be working with our assessor to do that. But to your point, their historical rate, they've been in business for almost 40 years, their historical rate of success is over 98%. And that is a testament to the fact that they are setting the right assessments. And they're, basically I always explain, since it's important to show a visual in my hands, but right now we have a very low assessment in town. The average assessment is $182,000. We all know that's very low for the average house in town. The tax rate's at 9.2 points for the taxes. We're going to be shifting those. So the assessments are going to go to what market value should be. So the average assessment right now has been estimated at about $805,000. The tax rate, instead of being 9.2 and change, it's estimated to be roughly 2.1 and change. That's based on 18 numbers. So again, the public needs to be reassured that, yes, while you might have an increase in assessment, the tax rate goes down, which is supposed to balance it out. But yeah, the success rate of the company is very high. They have a very good reputation, and they're really doing a very good job here. 2 other towns have just hired them, and they've been ordered to do the revaluation. That's Fanwood and Garwood. And they've also are looking to be hired other towns in the county. And I will say, Neil Rubenstein, the principal of the company, we've done a couple of presentations together. Really knowledgeable person, and be able to answer any question. And he's calling people that are having questions beyond the meetings that we're having here. So we've gotten really good service from them. So it's good. So, any other questions, thoughts, Jim? Yes.
Jim, was there any surprises in the 2018 budget? Anything that was kind of not anticipated, kind of came out of left field?
So the question is, were there any surprises in the 2018 budget? Actually, thankfully, no. The biggest, I don't want to say surprise, but the biggest issues really are always on the revenue side. So we were happy to learn we had a nice number for excess tax collections. We were happy to learn we did very well on our interest on investments. And we're happy to learn we actually earn extra revenue in certain categories. So for example, the building department, our construction officials here, his department produces a lot of revenue. And one of the things we did in 2018 is a conscious decision was to increase the anticipated amount, because we knew that we were going to have a certain volume of investment into homes and buildings. In doing that, obviously that's a bit risky sometimes because you don't know if you're going to collect it. Well, I'm happy to say we increased the anticipated amount and collected it back plus a little bit more. So again, not a surprise per se, but a happy result from a decision that was made consciously to do that. So one example. On the appropriations side, nothing of a major surprise. Luckily, the only thing that really was something, and we were able to plan for it last minute, the March snowstorm that happened last year, which was, if you remember it was devastating to the tree canopy and power outages. So literally the last week before the budget was introduced, we were able to go back and insert money to cover those costs in police, fire, and public works budgets. And basically those are things now that we may be able to reduce going forward. Again, knock on wood, we have no more storms. But so that was the only real surprise. We were able to handle that though. Everything else went pretty normally. So, yes.
I was thinking about the recycling contract.
Well, I was going to say, so the only surprise that isn't going to affect 18, but it's going to affect 19. And that is, as the CFO mentions, our recycling contract. And we've talked about this many times at council meetings, but because of the recycling markets and the industry itself, less to be collected and more cost to do it. And so that contract more than doubled. And so that affects the public works budget, because that's where that item is done. We have some small offsets to that. We do get, back to the grants question, we do get the tonnage grant, which we perform very well on usually. Also, we get money from the Union County Utilities Authority, because we actually, every town has the ability to drop off materials there and get money back for it. So we do have some offsets to the recycling contract, but nothing compared to what the total cost is. So that'll be a surprise in 18. We'll be able to manage it, of course, but that was, and every town's experiencing that, not just Westfield. So, but no, we're happy to say there wasn't major surprises, which was always good in the budget. So, yes, sir.
Events like the Pizza Run, the Downtown Festival, the Adams Fest, profitable for the town, not profitable? How does that shake out?
Okay, so questions about events in town. He mentioned Pizza Run, Jazz Fest, Adams Fest. Lots of other things that go on too. But anyway, so yes, a couple things, important distinctions here. So the Downtown Westfield Corporation is a entity appointed by the town council that oversees the special improvement district tax. That is separate from the residential tax. It's a separate collection for properties that are only in a certain defined geographic area, which is really the downtown. It's a little bit bigger than the central business district. So they pay a certain amount to the town, and we remit that to the Downtown Westfield Corporation to provide services, events, and so forth. So the two events you mentioned first, the 5K race and the Jazz Fest, those are things that are actually run by and paid for out of that special district tax. And those, you know, I think the 5K race this year is in his 18th year, and the Jazz Fest is in his 22nd year, I think. So again, highly successful, very profitable races. In Adams Fest case, there was a first-time event that actually happened in Westfield in 18 and was budgeted for in the municipal budget as seed money. Because the DWC does events and they're successful at it, we actually work with them as a partner on that event. And we had I don't know how long ago, maybe a month or two ago, we did release some information about the event. And actually, it did prove to be profitable the first year, even with all the expenses. So one of the nice things we might see, we still have yet to discuss all the details, but the seed money for that should be much reduced, because now we have money in a separate account to start that off and be able to have that event going forward. So again, but a lot of events are run by the town. A lot of events are run by private organizations to benefit the town. We haven't, luckily, had any event that really has been a problem for us from a financial perspective yet. So.
And even with Adams, that's where a couple of first-time expenses that were incurred, that were one-time
Yes.
things.
Yeah. What we like to call, yeah.
Be repeated. So we're really hoping with that event, particularly given how many attendees there were and participants, that we can, take it to a very profitable thing.
Yeah, just to repeat for the people on the camera, again, the councilman was talking about as a first-time event, as most first-time events, you have a lot of, first-time costs, one-off costs, and so those we did have those, and those will not be repeated. So there are things we purchased, we now have for the future, let's say banners, decorations, those type of things.
The Adams House
Yeah, the Adams House, the Skeleton, so all those things are, so those are one-time events that happened in 2018, and even with those things, you end up being profitable. So 2019, we'll see how it goes, but we expect, obviously, we should do very well for that event, and we'll see how it goes. There's talk about expanding it, making it, a little more than just one weekend, so there's lots of opportunity. But yeah, we're very lucky. For a first-time event, it's rare that you come out profitable, so that was a very positive thing, so.
It's probably also worth noting that you can look at them from a P&L perspective, and I'd also look at them as investments in our town. Like this town, the downtown is critical to it. And I think those events, and there was a step up in activity last year, and I would imagine there'll be a further step up this year. It brings people downtown, it supports the businesses, it actually motivates new businesses to come to town, and so it's great that they handle the budget and Adams has delivered a profit. But even if it didn't, I still think it's the right thing for the town because it supports the business community. Right? In our town, I think many of us moved here for that. So I think it's all good.
So then, is there a committee that's going after new events then?
Well, it's part of the DWC. So promotions is one of their 4 standing committees. And I would expect that there's, in fact, we just saw it the other night, like there's even, I think, more events that they've proposed for this year than last year because I think they were incredibly well attended. Besides Adams Fest, the Second Sunday events, the pizza run, the different 5Ks, and I think that's what creates this great community that we all live in.
Yeah, just for the public on camera, again, the conversation has been about the benefit, the non-monetary benefit of some of these events for the town, and just to tack on to that again, as Councilman Contract mentioned. The DWC has had a long history of many successful events, but we added some events, and just this past Tuesday at the council meeting, the DWC and the Chamber of Commerce came to the council to present their events of the year. Similar events are being run. We're adding things to it. So the Second Sunday events, of course, our second year. We'll be doing those and added a date or two to that, I believe. And there's more events in the planning that have not been yet asked for, but I'm sure will come to the table shortly with the council. So, yeah, again, we almost have, in many ways, an embarrassment of riches in Westfield with the events we have going on, services and resources. So it's a good problem to have, which is nice. So, yes, sir.
Frequent conversation everyone has about the commercial vacancy rate in town. How significant does that affect our tax receipts as it moves up and down?
Okay, so the question is about commercial vacancy rate in town and how that might affect tax payments and rates going forward. Okay. So I guess important to note that, again, every town, Westfield's no different. We're seeing vacancy rates happen over the past number of years due to the national economy and so forth. A couple things to note. To really answer your question simply is no, it doesn't have an effect on the tax bill because the property owners are obligated to pay. And there have been occasions that we've heard about, and the DWC does monitor this for us as part of the Main Street organization. They monitor things like vacancy rates for us, new openings, also investment in the downtown from a commercial perspective, how the building department actually, the permits they get. So they do a lot of reporting on this. But there are many occasions where the store may be vacant, but the property owner is still receiving rent because of the actual contract they may have had with that tenant. So just important to know that for the public. So again, it's never one empty store, but of course the property owner may not be necessarily not receiving rent for that. So, but from a tax perspective, there's no impact on taxes, which is important. So, and again, it's important to note that Westfield, despite changes in the national economy, we still continue to be a destination place. And every day, council members, DWC, we have a dedicated organization that does that. The Chamber of Commerce helps out with that. So we're fortunate to have all these organizations that are constantly focusing on our downtown to make sure it continues to be vibrant and successful. So, yes.
With all the apartment buildings being built in town now, do we expect a windfall of tax revenues down the road from those when they become occupied?
So yeah, good question. So this is about, so with all the apartment buildings being built in town and other ones to come, do we expect a windfall of tax revenue? So a couple things just to go back for a moment. There has been some development going on. You've seen it now. Our most recent things that are being built now is corner of West Broad South and Rawway, which is a 31 unit apartment complex there. Our town planner is here, so he's been heavily involved in the planning of this whole thing. And also other unit, which is just, our other complex is just starting on the traffic circle, the old Pan Am Cleaners site. That's 35 units.
30 units
7,000 square feet in commercials.
Okay, so 30 units there. And these are two examples of other things to come. Part of every town has been required to adopt what they call an affordable housing plan, which is called a fair share housing plan, which basically every town is obligated to set a path and have a plan forward to provide housing in the town and provide an affordable housing component to that. So we actually have just received last year a very well thought out plan for the town to manage that development. You've heard in other towns, you hear stories about towns, having lawsuits and, losing things, having a 900 unit or a 500 unit place. That's not going to happen in Westfield. There's going to be development, but we're going to be able to control it and keep it, to what we think is in the character of the town. So those are two things. And so to answer your question, we will have some tax increase revenue because the properties that are being developed in some cases are now just property, no improvements on it. In other cases, they're old commercial properties that actually are still paying taxes, of course, but their change of use, the new improvement on the property will increase the value of that property. So we have seen that a little bit with the two properties that have been finished, the South and Central property and the, what's the other one that's finished, Don? Oh, the Jolly Trolley, the old Jolly Trolley building. But we're going to be seeing more. So these two buildings will come online, we expect, sometime in 2019, and there's some more in the pipeline in different areas of town. One of the things that the public understands is that one of the things we did in this plan, we really focused on areas that we thought could use improvement and need development. So the North Avenue and South Avenue corridors were looked at as areas where what we call put an overlay zone on them. So if the property owner wants to continue to operate the property as they have it now, they're more than happy to do that. But they are incentivized, if they want to do something differently and improve the property in some way, to use the overlay zoning to their advantage, and also then that makes it an advantage to the town to provide housing for affordable housing units and provide new development and new taxes for the town. So we're going to see this coming, and it's coming everywhere. If you drove right one town over to Garwood, you see it happening there. Lots of things being knocked down and new development going up there. So, but it is exciting because, again, people want to come here. One last thing to say is this is a good statistic, I think, to give the example of the demand for housing in Westfield. So part of the process that our town planner runs, he's our housing liaison. By law, he's appointed to kind of help to manage the affordable housing obligation in town, along with a third-party vendor. And what's required when affordable housing comes open, there's a required HUD process, a lottery process you have to sign up for, and there's a vetting process that goes through as required by state law. The 9 units, affordable units that were included in the 333 Central property, we had over 1,200 applications for those 9 units. That same list today, now that was about 2 years ago, Ann, about that, in that range? That same list today is over 6,000 people that actually are online in a lottery format, some within our region, some outside our region, but yet nonetheless the process basically says you have to have this list. And so as these units come online, there's a big demand for the whole region, not just Westfield, but the whole region. So, but every town has its own list, and we have ours on the website of our third-party vendor, and people want to be here. So that's a good problem to have. So.
Hey, Jim, related to that, so the 2 properties under development, is, from a revaluation perspective, is the value of the new property to be built included, or is it still the value of the old property that's either empty or was being knocked down? So like take the Pan Am Cleaner site or Central Avenue, properties that either were in disrepair or empty. And what was captured in the revaluation?
So the question is about revaluation, the new properties that are going up now on those 2 properties, the Pan Am Cleaners and the new property on Railway South and Central, what was captured in the revaluation process. So my understanding is the revaluation process has captured everything as of October 1st of 18. That's the statutory process, because we don't know yet what the tax rate is for 2019. So everything is based off 2018. Of course, what will happen is the new tax rates will be set, and then basically later this year, once we get the actual certificate of occupancy for those buildings and the values are determined, the assessor will work with the property owner, and she's able to make adjustments for new construction before October 1st of the calendar year, right? And if not, it'll be picked up in the next round of tax cycle. But we're likely one of those buildings, if not both, might be able to pick it up this year in the October 1st assessment change. But for the revaluation, everything's as of October 1st of 18 for the time being. So they're probably under the old number now, and then they'll be adjusted accordingly. So it's no different than anyone does work in their home. And between tax cycles, your permits get picked up, they go to the assessor's office, she'll actually assess the new value of the property, a bathroom, a kitchen, a renovation, or exterior renovation, and that'll be added as the assessment the following tax cycle. So, anything else? Yes, sir. Does the town own any large parcels of land? Yes, we own lots of parking lots. So the town does own a lot of land. Most of it is the buildings we're sitting in, our facilities, but we do own a lot of surface parking in the downtown. And we also own, when you look at a tax map, looking at it closely, you own lots of little pieces everywhere that really were likely a result of zoning changes that kind of left, island pieces in places. But no, we own mostly large surface lots and town facilities. And then, of course, the Board of Education, same thing. Another major governmental agency they own their facilities and the fields with that are attached to them. So we are probably, the county, of course, has a few buildings in town too, so they own some property as well. But I would guess that the Board of Education and the town are probably two of the largest property owners in the entire town.
Jim, maybe it would be good to mention the town property sales that we're considering too.
Yeah, good point. So yeah, Councilman's asking about property sales that we're considering. So back to the affordable housing obligations. So while we were going through, and every town is going through this, the affordable housing obligations and creating the new plan that we have in place, we didn't actually move forward, and we were advised not to do that, to sell any town property, because basically we want to make sure that was preserved in case there was some opportunity to develop that vacant land in some way. And so now that we have a plan, we're able to go back now, revisit a lot of the requests we have. Residents do requests to buy property. A lot of the times it's property that's adjacent to them. Might have been a strip of land that is between them and their neighbor. It was there, for whatever reason, we have to maintain it, but they want to buy it to add to their taxable property to maybe expand something, or, get a bigger footprint of their garage or their driveway, or, those type of things happen. So we had maybe a list of 10 or more property owners that have contacted us over the years that we've saved. And now we're revisiting those. We're going back to see if they're still interested. And then there's a process for selling municipal property. When you sell municipal property, you must, by law, offer the property to every contiguous property owner. If more than one property owner is interested, it must go to public auction. If only one property owner is interested, we can then continue with a closing as normal. You would sell a property as normal. But all those monies would go back to the town and can be used as surplus going forward. We have a separate account for those, though. It's called our sale of assets account, which is another surplus account, but it's really meant for asset sales to go in there. And then that's usually meant for other purchasing of other assets or capital needs. But we're now revisiting it for the first time in many years. So we're hoping to slowly, over time, if we think it's appropriate to sell certain properties that either are no use to the town or maintenance responsibilities we don't need to have anymore, but residents want those, we can actually entertain those, and we're doing that now. So, anything else?
You mentioned at the top, I thought I saw a bullet item about the county discussion. Was that already talked about, or is there any more detail about the county, or did I miss that?
No, I think we were just referencing how the amount of money goes to the school, county, and the library.
But maybe about the county meeting.
I think the meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, in a month or so. We're
So
going
it was
to
a county meeting in a month, okay.
So the question is about meeting with the county, and I think you announced that the Freeholder Kim is going to come to a meeting with, I guess, representatives from the county as well, talk about tax dollars that we send to the county, how they're spent, and also how they're calculated, which is important people to understand. Just a little bit I know about it is, again, people should understand that the property tax values of the town, again, the ratables of the town are what's used to calculate county taxes. So it's always a balancing act. We're very fortunate to have the highest property tax values in the entire county. Summit and Westfield are the two highest property tax values in the county. It also means we pay the most money in the county. So again, we've had meetings in the past, so looking forward to that meeting and seeing, Chris Durier is a tax assessor, a wonderful guy. We work with him very closely in the assessor's office, so I know he's a valuable asset to explain those kind of things as well. So.
I just want to add, I think it's fabulous we have one of our own as a freeholder. That's huge for us, and that's a big compelling item that we have somebody in our own representing us now. That's huge. So thank you.
Good. Anybody else? Anything I'm missing? Anything else you want to share? Okay, so I have a lot of knowledge about lots of things, but not everything. So, but first of all, it's important to note that, again, it's important that you all came tonight, asked these questions. This meeting is being filmed for TV 36. It'll also be broadcast on our social media outlets, YouTube, website, Facebook, I guess. And I guess the last thing that's on the slide here, we do have a budget email address. Last year in the budget and in previous years, we've actually encouraged people to email us at that address. And we're able to respond to those questions. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions once we introduce the budget and get more information on it, but it's an important thing. The questions that come in, we are able to respond, and we post those answers and responses online as FAQs. And it's very educational to people, because a lot of people don't know the basic information, and it's important to understand it. So, but municipal budgeting is very different than other budgeting, and there's lots of the regulations, but it also is kind of exciting and fun because it's a big puzzle. Scott and I like putting the puzzle together with the council, and every year it's unique to do, but it's really what allows us to do what everyone in this room here, the department heads, do. All the department heads are here, and the work doesn't get done without them and their staff. So it's an exciting time every year to have this. It may not be exciting to everybody, but it's exciting to me, exciting to Scott, and it's important because this is what allows us to do the things for the residents: leaf collection, snow removal, potholes, services, recreation programs. The list goes on and on. So it's a very important thing. So I want to just thank, as administrator, thank everyone for coming tonight and listening to me. So, Linda, I didn't share anything else. No.
So please do go home and share with your neighbors and your other family members any ideas or suggestions that you want to send our way, because we do have a month or so left to be considering all these things. There are a lot of great ideas percolating around. For example, to improve the council chambers so that we can make that space more inviting for people to come and participate in the council meetings, and plans potentially for this room so that this can be used for more community events. So we're thinking about technology and efficiencies, and Jim, I think, thank you, Jim, for all that detail. It's amazing that you can remember all that stuff. But ideas that you have for revenue, because I'm sitting there thinking there's a long list of things that we've brought up as ideas and things that we're executing now. Jim mentioned this, the sale of town property, and so all those little things add up. We're going to be enforcing a lot of the fees around building and things like that, because we're hearing that community members are not happy that these things aren't being enforced. So we're going to enforce them because they're rules on our books that should be enforced, and it's a source of revenue to the town. So I also am excited about budget season starting. I guess I'm also a geek with you guys, but it's okay. But please send your ideas. Thank you so much for coming out in 5-degree weather, and we'll look forward to being back here in March to tell you how it all turned out, with the idea being that we're going to use some of the money that we generated this year to put to good use toward our priorities, and do the best job we can to keep taxes as level as possible. We only raised them by 0.5% last year, and we're hoping to even do better this year. So thanks so much.